Oh dear folks, Red Bull might be in trouble again. But it's not just them this time. Red Bull, come on, I told you to go easy on the canapes. The Italian publication La Gazzetta dello Sport has actually broken some very big interesting news concerning that 4 teams in Formula 1, nearly half the grid, might be in trouble with the FIA cost cap now that a loophole has finally been closed concerning activities outside of Formula 1. The current cost cap for Formula 1 is $135 million a year, and pretty much the majority of the grid has been able to adapt to it. Haas now actually adhering to the cost cap for the first time because they pull in so many sponsors. But now the FIA has issued a new technical directive, TD45, which, to make sure I get perfectly accurate, is said to have been issued in order to better police the category of non-F1 activities, covering the design of boats, bicycles, or road cars, whereby teams can transfer personnel to such projects where they would no longer be counted under the F1 budget cap. You know, instead of doing something a lot more simpler and a lot less risky, like downsizing, or maybe not spending as much on their cars, like how Tomo pointed out in his video that Toyota one year spent nearly $2/3 billion on their cars and still got 5th in the constructors. Because this loophole is closed, the FIA is looking at Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, and Aston Martin concerning what they are doing outside of the grid, not to do necessarily with Formula 1, but in other interests that they might be involved in indirectly. Basically to do with their satellite operations. Mercedes could have something to do with the fact that they've really been pouring a lot of upgrades on their W14, a lot, and it really doesn't help that Toto's been going on record saying that I'm not going to let no measly cost cap get in the way of improving my W14 car. Oh, Toto, please don't say stuff like that. You're just asking for trouble right now. Mercedes have a little bit of a plum in the America's Cup sailing event, where Team Ineos, which is a very big stakeholder within the Mercedes AMG team, are actually doing fairly well. And the research and development going into making lightweight sailing boats could be something to do with maybe the creation of lightweight materials, transferring personnel from the F1 team to the sailing team, and therefore being able to plow in as much money as they want, and then maybe something be carried over to the Formula 1 team. As for Red Bull, they haven't invested in a big catering company or anything like that. No. They've partnered up with the likes of BMC to try and create the world's fastest lightweight bike to make the fastest 2-wheel vehicle possible that doesn't have an engine in it. That too can be used in the pursuit of actually trying to find lightweight materials and components that could be then transferred into the development of Formula 1 cars without actually spending any money on the F1 cost cap specifically. So there has been that little loophole that these teams can now just put all of their energy and resources into things outside of Formula 1 and then maybe squeak it back in somehow, because it's just like, oh, well, we technically didn't spend any money on it, so that doesn't count. Ferrari won Le Mans this year in the hypercar division of the World Endurance Championship race for the 24 hours. And we're all really happy to see that. And Antonio Giovinazzi, aka the Italian Jesus, getting recognition after being dumped by Alfa Romeo in 2021. And then when he had the chance to come back at Haas for 2023, he kind of binned it at Austin. But that doesn't really matter right now. He's found a really good career in endurance racing, and good for him as well. But what's not so good is the development of that Ferrari hypercar. Because the hypercar was developed by Ferrari and certain materials could be then transplanted to Ferrari's Formula 1 team, even though based on their performance this year it's really not looking likely, the FIA might want to take a closer look at the hypercar development, because it does fall under the FIA bracket still, because it's still a motorsport category, and they might want to clarify, well, what things are you learning in the hypercar? Could you be trying to circumvent the cost cap? Or is it just a genuine reallocation of assets that have nothing to do with Formula 1 because Ferrari can't spend nearly as much money because they used to spend like nearly $200–300 million a year on Formula 1 and instead just plowed it into something else? Just something for them to do, which might be perfectly legit. What the FIA wants to see and make sure of is that there's no sort of actual bridge between the two projects, that they're completely and entirely separate. Now, what about Aston Martin? Well, what are they doing? I mean, you could easily say that it might be something to do with their road car division. Things that they're learning on the road might be then brought over into the Formula 1 project. Well, Not so, because usually it's the other way round. Stuff that is actually made in Formula One does trickle down to the road car division eventually. It takes like maybe 10-15 years to see stuff that was innovated in Formula One maybe make it into supercars later on. You're not going to be getting road car development making F1 cars better. Aston Martin sought special dispensation from the FIA to spend $240 million on their brand new factory outside Silverstone, which has recently come online. Okay, this is all part and parcel of developing a team to try and make things a little bit more even. They actually sought special permission and it was granted, so therefore they've been able to make it. But maybe the FIA wants to make sure that everything was above board here and that things concerning the budget for that building development weren't then carried over to the Formula One project. So far, no one's in really big trouble yet. It's just something that is actually starting to catch the attention of Formula One, because now the loophole's been closed, you might be thinking, well, this is just an easy mistake. The big four teams were just trying to find ways of reallocating assets, resources, and personnel into other projects. That means they still had a job, and therefore they wouldn't be fired and left to try and find work in other disciplines, or maybe even having to find a completely new career altogether. That's completely fair. But now there's a little bit of rumblings, and the FIA wants to make absolutely sure that that was the reason, and not trying to find outside avenues to try and develop the Formula One project and then push themselves away from the rest of the pack, meaning that Formula 1.5 is an even more apparent prospect. You know, the likes of Alpine, McLaren, Alfa Romeo, going with the rules that have actually been enforced, and then the big four teams are just going off doing their own thing, finding loopholes, and then just making it even more apparent that you're not going to have any upsets and you'll be lucky to even get 9th place. Even the likes of Otmar Safnauer, the Alpine boss, are saying, well, good. I'm glad that these teams are being investigated. We're trying to follow the rules here. And we're trying to really completely deviate from the fact that last year we lost 2 of our own drivers because we weren't really good with contracts. Oh dear. And as for special dispensation, if this all comes about and then Aston Martin are found to be in trouble, like they were actually with the 2021 cost cap, they got fined $500,000 as well. It wasn't just Red Bull and their catering bill. If they get in trouble again, then this should be all the more reason for Williams to get their special dispensation of $36 million from James Vowles to try and improve their aged facilities and try and get themselves back up on the grid. $36 million sounds a lot more reasonable, so I'd want to actually make sure and clarify that that was actually to the building of that factory and not siphoning some things off. Now, by the way, folks, this is all conjecture. Why these 4 teams are being investigated specifically for what has been going on. What could be the actual penalty for all of these transgressions? Well, considering that this is a loophole that has been closed and this wasn't just a flagrant disregard of the rules that were initially stated, it's just something that these 4 teams might just be caught napping and they might be just given a simple warning saying you need to cut these things off or else you will get in trouble. Or if it goes really, really deep and there's been a long time development collaboration between these outfits outside of Formula One, then maybe some more hefty things might be coming their way. And if Red Bull are actually caught to have actually broken the rules again, they might get an even steeper wind tunnel penalty or a bigger fine or maybe points docked. We don't really know. We'll actually see more of this being developed. But considering that McLaren is not one of the teams being investigated, I must now don my McLaren bubble hat of bias. Realistically, I want these teams to be investigated and a conclusion found, because I want the other teams, including McLaren and Alpine, to actually be closer to the Formula One teams, and this might actually explain why there's such a big gulf between the front runners and the rest of the pack, and that Williams can actually catch up as well, and that also our McLaren upgrades might actually bridge the gap between ourselves and the big 4. I'm curious to see what comes about from all of this, but I'm starting to get the feeling that the 2021 cost cap thing with Aston and Red Bull, that might not be the last time this happens. Stay posted.